AI is revolutionizing private equity deal sourcing, but founders can spot generic AI spam emails a mile away. And if you're not careful, you're going to be burning bridges before the conversation even starts. Today's guest, Raj Singh, built an AI-powered company using IBM Watson a decade before AI was the buzzword. And as a founder, he's received thousands of private equity outreaches. Today, Raj is revealing the biggest AI outreach mistakes that private equity firms are making today and how to fix them, how to use AI to personalize outreach at scale without making founders disengage, and how top deal makers combine AI with trust-driven relationships to win the best deals. If you're using AI in deal sourcing or plan to, tune in for the masterclass from an AI pioneer and exited SaaS founder on leveraging AI to enhance trust, build relationships, and close more deals. This is Deal Sorcery. Raj, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Super good to be here, and I'm excited to dive into the founder's perspective on these things.
Likewise, buddy. Really appreciate it. So like the craziest thing here to me, right, is that we live today in this world of just like constant AI buzz, I feel like. And you're like you're like an OG here now, right? I mean, like you launched an AI business a decade ago. Like wasn't it 2014, like 10 years ago now?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 10 years ago in 2014, we brought to market an AI solution for the hospitality industry, and not just AI, but also like chat-based, kind of similar to a lot of the technologies that we're familiar with today. Of course, respective to what's out today, it felt like we were building with sticks and stones at the time. And of course, educating the market on, what artificial intelligence is. And I just, if I had $1 for every time I had to tell someone, trust me, it will be big someday. Like this is going to work out. This is the right area to invest in. I think maybe that I wouldn't have needed to sell the company at some point, but yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a journey, and it's been incredible to see. At that time, I was looking at the scientific literature and just the hockey stick of papers that were coming out in the AI space, and to see that commercialize in the way that it has, and frankly, we're just starting to commercialize, I think, properly this whole new industry. It's just been a real pleasure.
I mean, you were so ahead of the curve, right? Like building an AI-powered business before AI became the buzzword it is today. What goes through your mind, right, when you see all the current hype that's out there? Like, do you feel validated? Do you feel frustrated? Like maybe something else entirely? Like what's your feeling when you contrast what you've built starting 10 years ago and what you see today?
It's kind of interesting. It validation, I think, is part of it for sure, because yes, the whole market is now, awake to this possibility of doing more with less, which is, it's been a classic theme for decades, if not, over 100 years at this point. But being able to do it intelligently, I think is the new thing. And every executive is realizing that intelligence is, currently pennies at the per API request, with chatgpt and similar systems, and that it is trending to zero, right, with open source foundational models and other technology that's coming into the fray. So I think that it's really interesting to watch the commercialization start at this point. But what's interesting also is that a lot of the technology solutions that are out there, there's a lot of noise and hype, and a lot of kind of expectations that are being set that I do worry about. Will all those expectations be met by that specific solution vendor, by that specific team that's bringing something to market? Because unfortunately, it's the classic Gartner hype cycle. I'd say that we're either at peak AI or a little bit past that peak right now in terms of expectations. And the thing is this a super cycle where we just continue to grow? Because yes, the technology is getting massively better. Every 6 months, 12 months, there are massive breakthroughs. But I would say that to some extent, I would say I'm a bit concerned, because this is a good time for enterprises to be very measured and cautious, and make sure that if they're only contracting with folks that have been in the industry for the last 6 months or 12 months and they just hopped on the bandwagon because it's hot, they may not know where the rough edges are for this solution. They may not know exactly how to commercialize this. So I think that cautious and optimistic and validated, I think those are the feelings for somebody who's been in the space for 10 years.
Do you think, like, are we going into a trough of despair, or like have we already gone past that?
there's not a single person under 30 who's not using ChatGPT every day at work. And I think that adoption, is similar to the kind of adoption that I saw last time probably was with Google, right? Not even, these other, even social media apps, even though they were very quickly adopted, they may not have been integrated into the work day-to-day routine as quickly as ChatGPT and other language models have been. So I would say that there will be a trough of disillusionment at some point, within kind of subsectors of the AI space. I would say that there are, for example, there were, I think on Hacker News about 6 months ago, in like early 2024, there were all these different startups doing pitch decks, create kind of generated via Gen AI kind of solutions. And some of those companies raised like $75 million at a 200 post money kind of valuation, and a lot of those companies no longer are in the pitch deck business. It's only been 6 or 8 months, and their pivot has been complete. And that there's so many people rushing in for kind of obvious opportunities from a technology perspective that there's like no saturation, oversaturation, and then that trough I think is coming pretty quickly. On the other side, I think where the real value creation is in enabling the enterprise to actually adopt Gen AI safely in a way that they can actually get a handle on their, compute costs and policies, and making sure that their brand is safe. I think we're entering this world where a lot of advertising, a lot of outreach, a lot of communications are just going to get hyper personalized by the generative AI. But the question is, how do you make sure that respects your brand, that honors all of the brand values and the other things that are important to your enterprise? And it's not yet clear what that tooling stack will look like.
There's so much for us to unpack there, right? But before we do that, because I definitely want to spend a good chunk of time with us on, AI, what's coming, what you've seen, et cetera. But walk us back for a minute, right? Like, so for the folks who don't know, how do you describe like what is or was Go Moment?
Yeah, sure. So in 2014, my family owned and operated some hotels and resorts. So I got to see this like owner and manager kind of perspective of what a hotel's operations look like. And one thing that was really clear to me at that point was that in 2014, your hotel was no longer competing with the Hilton down the street, the Marriott around the corner. It was now competing with Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, Netflix, right? Because everything was on demand for the consumer already and only getting more so. And unfortunately, at the hotel, if you need towels, you kind of pick up an in-room phone, you figure out, what number to dial, you wait maybe 45 minutes or 3 hours, who knows when your towels are coming. And that black box system just wasn't going to work for the future. And of course, we were also betting on the fact that labor was going to just continue to get more expensive in developed parts of the world and even across the entire world. So what we created at Go Moment was a AI and human powered hotel concierge. So we call this a hybrid system, of course, which is common vernacular today. And we named this AI Ivy, and Ivy welcomes guests to the hotel with a text message, a WhatsApp, whatever communication channel they prefer at the time of check-in typically. And then Ivy says, hey, Dan, thanks for coming to Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. If I can help you with the Wi-Fi password, drinks by the poolside, room service, anything like that, show tickets, restaurant reservations, just let me know and by a text. I'm available to you 365 days out of the year. Anywhere in the city, you can just reach out to me. You don't even have to be inside the hotel to get service. So when people started getting these messages from Ivy in 2014, it was a state shift because they were used to waiting, 10, 20, 30 minutes for service, sometimes, waiting behind 5 people in line at the front desk. And now things were instant. And then when they said, what is the Wi-Fi password? 1 second later, they have an answer. Where's the best sushi restaurant nearby? 1 second later. Again, because Ivy has seen that message from, thousands, if not millions of guests previously. She knew exactly how to handle that one. So she handled it. Anything tricky, complicated goes over to the front desk. And essentially, Ivy's able to automate 50% of conversations that way. So yeah, we started to roll out to the Vegas Strip. About half the Vegas Strip now uses Ivy. We've got hundreds of incredible hotels around the world that also use the system. And Ivy's now helped 100 million people have a better hotel stay on her mission to make 1 billion people smile.
And I love that, the billion people smile, piece. Like, maybe that kind of ties us back to this other question I had in mind, which is like, when you tell the story of, Raj the entrepreneur, like where does that story begin? And like, how did this piece around, making people smile play into that? When did that come about?
I would say my story as an entrepreneur starts at age 15, when basically I was learning how to code and design and animate just for fun, because that I was just really interested in those areas of computing. And interestingly, I didn't have a manual. There was no Stack Overflow yet. There was not really YouTube. Actually, no, YouTube officially didn't exist then. So my only method of learning was just like going to web pages, right clicking, going view source, and trying to make sense of the gobbledygook that I saw. So
right.
After banging my head against the computer and the keyboard for long enough, I started to get decent at designing and animating, and I started putting things up on forums and just kind of putting things out there. And when I was 17, Cheryl Crow's management actually reached out to me, and they said, "Hey, we're trying to finish up her website. It looks like you've got the skills needed to finish this up. We're kind of behind the eight ball a little bit. So do you want to take this project?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I guess."
So you built one of Cheryl Crow's first websites?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, this was, I think, around 2001 or two, when that was my first customer in the media space. And yeah, I finished that project, sent in my invoice, and then basically, that turned into 150 customers, including Lady Gaga, Kanye West, 50 Cent, a ton of other, Sony, Universal, just like all the media brands you can think of. And what I learned from that experience was that basically, I wanted to make myself not the bottleneck, because I was like, well, I'm decent at this stuff, and clients thought, I was really good, but I was like, no, I know people that are way better than me at this. So let me go find those people, hire them, build teams. And we started building, video streaming platforms, all kinds of other advanced technologies. We were really early on Ruby on Rails. So essentially, I just love building product, and I love finding people who are much, much better than me at the design aspect, at the coding and architecture aspect. So we did 1 billion page views out of that company in the about 8 or 9 years of operations. And that was a really staggering number for me as a creative, because I was like, well, I can do 1 billion of something. This is crazy. It's like it just like didn't really compute to me. I was in my late 20s at the time, and but then, kind of going back to that trough of disillusionment thing, as a creative, I was like, okay, well, that I was kind of riding high on that number. And then I started to think, what have I really done for the people who have interacted with the technology that we created? Like, did they laugh? Did they, did they cry? Did they did it glitch out for them?
Like, what sort of impact could you drive with 1 billion of something?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I was specifically trying to quantify the impact that we had driven from those 1 billion page views. And I realized I didn't know, and my clients didn't know either, right? Like, the clients were interested in selling, albums, MP3s, downloads, what have you there. It wasn't really about the impact and making someone's day, or making sure that they found that little Easter egg that my team and I hid behind the third option in the about menu, right? Because that's what makes, I think, building technology and building products so delightful and engaging for creative. So I basically said, okay, well, the next 1 billion of something I do, I want to make sure that, my team and I leave this planet a little bit better than we found it. And so that's how we landed on create 1 billion unforgettable experiences. If we can make somebody's day a little bit better, give them, the Wi-Fi password in 2 seconds instead of, 7 minutes or something like that, and let them just get on with their day, that it's going to be accretive, to the business. It's, the money, everything else will take care of itself. So that was really the mission of the company. And since day one, that was exactly what we adopted. And of course, that then led us to, the large space of hospitality, where the US market processes 1.2 billion check-ins every year. That's just the US. So, globally, it's a massive opportunity. And then it also led us to artificial intelligence, in 2014, because how else are you going to create 1 billion of something, if it's not for, automation? And of course, when COVID happened, the fact that we were already 50% automated, we were fully contactless, and we were a revenue driving platform for hotels just completely, put us at the right place at the right time there.
I remember vividly, like, when we started spending time together, I also just remember, like, it felt like at the time that you guys were like the bells of the ball. You know what I mean? Like, you and you in particular, like, you'd been speaking on stage at events for probably, close to a decade at that point. I don't know. Like you'd already been using, you had the IBM Watson partnership, all this sort of stuff. What was that first exposure to you to private equity, right? Like I imagine like the venture capital piece probably started a lot earlier, but I'd love to hear like your first experience, your first engagement with the private equity universe.
Yeah, it's I think going back to 2015, I think we were starting to, speak at a lot of events and make some noise with this whole AI thing. I think back then there weren't many applications that people could just point at and say like, hey, in the real world, this is how AI is actually, changing the world of business. So I think that there was some amount of notoriety that we got there. And what started happening pretty quickly from there is this like flood of emails from a lot of folks. Sometimes it's analysts, sometimes it's partners, sometimes it's VPs, from various private equity firms. And it's interesting because it's so obvious when somebody's actually done the research to know who you are, and there's high quality outreach, but I would say probably 90% of the emails that we got were quite low quality. Of the high quality ones, we would kind of take some time to engage and look up the fund, try to understand their thesis, and see if there was a good fit there. And within the first 5 or 7 conversations that I had with some of the cold outreach people from the private equity world, it was pretty obvious that this was not going to necessarily help our business anytime soon. And that a lot of these folks were well-meaning, like obviously very professional and came from a good place, but ultimately that their incentives and ours weren't necessarily aligned at that stage unless we were looking to do a transaction imminently. So the first exposure to private equity was through again like inbound interest for us. And it was not really something we were looking at. We had a number of venture capital investors, including Google, that ended up investing in the company. And basically we saw all this outreach and we were wondering to ourselves, is this the right fit? Private equity, I think for the startup ecosystem, there are a lot of different opinions on exactly how private equity and startups can work together. I think just getting input from friends and also taking our time to actually explore the space is how we navigated the first round there.
When you think back to building Go Moment, what kind of pitches or outreach that you received from PE or VC firms stood out to you, either as particularly memorable or frustrating? When you think back to all the things that you received.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the best pitch is no pitch, right? I think the best introductions always came through friends and other players that were connected within the industry, especially if it's at a time when we're not necessarily looking to transact, but rather just looking at good players in the market that really have a lot to offer. I'd say one of the highlights was, for example, when I connected with Dan through a mutual friend in the industry, getting to just understand Dan's perspective on the industry, his, just how deeply he knew the space, the hospitality space that we were working in, how other vendors are kind of doing certain things or solving problems. And then also just being able to attend like a bunch of networking events and conferences and things like that, and just seeing the same faces there, let us know that, okay, these people are part of our tribe, that they're kind of attending the same places. They know a lot of the same people. I think that's the most memorable and I'd say the highest quality signal that we were able to get to. On the flip side, I'd say frustration wise, I mean, oh man, if I've got so many emails in my inbox that are like, hey, we invest in companies from $10,000 of revenue to 10 billion, and anywhere in the technology sector, it's like clearly you're just like casting a super wide net and just waiting for people to kind of be maybe desperate enough to want to reach out or something. And those ones, I mean, they just went straight into either spam or something like that. One thing that was also frustrating is that a lot of these outreach people, whether they were kind of BDRs masquerading as a different title or something like that, they would pretend that their emails are personalized and not include an unsubscribe link. And it just got super frustrating to have to like actually email back some of these guys to just say like, hey, you've literally been sending me like 20 emails a month for the last 6 months. We're not interested. But sometimes you had to do that personally, which is not something that, you really want to kind of get distracted by as a founder. But I think that because we were in the press a good amount, we got written up in New York Times and Wall Street Journal and a number of other leading publications. I understand how that can drive interest, but yeah, there is such a thing as, I think, coming on too strong. And yeah, I think that that was definitely one way that we knew that we were not going to get in touch with, a company or not be transacting with them.
Let me ask you about volume. Can you recall like how much outreach you received at any point in time?
I'd say on a weekly basis, I was sifting through at least 20 outreaches from investors, maybe 30 sometimes. So again, depending on how hot the market was, what the M2 money supply looked like, and essentially how many dollars we're chasing deals. But yeah, 20 to 30 easily, of which I would actually know maybe like 2 people or 3 people. So yeah, the proportion was overwhelmingly
20 to 30 a week. Is that what you said?
Yeah, 20 to 30 a week. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it all through email, or were you getting phone calls? Were you getting people showing up at your doorstep?
Yeah, not people showing up at our doorstep, although I have heard stories from friends. I'd say like probably 80% email, 20% calls. And the calls, by the way, that's a great way to go directly on my shit list. If you're calling, especially not the company number, but if you're calling the founder's cell phone number, which unfortunately, tends to be up for sale despite our best efforts. Yeah, that's not a good look, I think, for busy founders. And again, the thing is that, every time that a PE firm reached out to me where they had something to offer, like a research report or some other kind of intel, or just something that showed that they were actually engaged in the space, that always stood out kind of heads and shoulders above the rest of the market, where you're starting the engagement by offering value instead of just saying like, hey, we have capital and that you should definitely come talk to us, kind of thing.
And I know you hit on this a little bit, but like, what made you think, gosh, I should spend some more time with Dan?
You guys were vertically focused, right? So I could see on your website at the time that you had many other investments in this space. When we initially spoke, it was extremely clear that you had a really good idea of the terrain and the landscape that we were dealing with. Yeah, just like it just turned out to be something where it was clear that if we hung out, that if I hang out with Dan, that I'm going to actually come away from that not just enjoying the interaction, but actually learning something about the industry, being able to compare notes, and also actually align on the vision and the mission of the company, which I thought was really unique about the kind of approach that I received from you guys. Because a lot of other PEs will ask about revenue metrics and churn rates and same store sales growth and all the other things that matter a ton in the business, without demonstrating that there's much regard for why the founder has chosen to take an irrational risk and put all of their skin in the game behind something that probably has at best like a 10% chance of success. Why would somebody who probably has lots of other opportunities in the market do that? I think that understanding why founders tick was something that's different about the highest quality private equity players that we've connected with.
Were there other characteristics like that of the folks that you ended up spending time with? Like common characteristics of people that felt worth your while?
Yeah, and by the way, it's not even like worth my while. It wasn't necessarily just like I guess there was always some triage that you're doing with outreach when the outreach just exceeds your ability to connect.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to be clear, like I'm not trying to discredit the value of anybody else that exists out there, right? But I'm just trying to understand for like when you think about the decision process that you either, intentionally or unintentionally made, like were there characteristics of the common characteristics that you can see of the folks that you ended up spending time with?
I'd say, the appropriate fund size, I think made a ton of sense to us just because, as followers of the investment sphere, we know that often, the fund size is the strategy. So, that's going to dictate a lot of, what kind of check you're looking at. And if there was a massive mismatch between our requirements and the fund's offerings, then that kind of made it a little bit of a non-starter, depending on how much flexibility there is. So just looking at their history of what kinds of investments they do, are they going after, companies that are on the upswing, or are they going after companies that are on the downswing? It's not too hard to establish that from the outside looking in. So that made a ton of difference. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, the mission alignment, actually, and again, maybe alignment's not the right word. Maybe it's just that they care about the founder's vision, and that, there seems to be some kind of connectivity with, like, yes, that there's a business here, but there was also just kind of blood, sweat, tears that have been poured into something for reasons that aren't always just purely economic. Because I don't think that founders are purely economic animals. Many of them are, and kind of will do anything for a buck. But I think that more and more founders are realizing that there is a difference that they can make with the things that they're doing. And any outreach that we got that showed that they understood that, like, what we created was beyond just the commercial aspect. I think that also stood out. And also, yeah, like I said earlier, I mean, there is such a thing as coming on too strong. I think if if there's too much outreach, it was a good reason for us to not really get in touch. And then, separately, also having the right person in the room was pretty helpful, unfortunately. But when you're triaging a lot of outreach, if it is somebody who's an analyst or, associate brand new at the company, you're just less likely to reach back out to that person, especially when their message is more likely to look, mass emailed. If it's a VP, a partner, somebody like that reaching out, and it is personalized and, has some kind of social proof and reference there to somebody that or a company that you're familiar with, I think that really cut through the noise as well.
So, Raj, given all of your experience and the longevity that you have within AI, we want to ask you a lot about your thoughts on how it might impact private equity and deal sourcing specifically. But maybe before we get into that, would you give us a primer on where things stand right now generally? Are we going to lose our jobs next year? I've heard that call centers are primed for AI replacement. What industries in your mind are prime targets for disruption?
Yeah, I think again, with technology, I think I go back to the William Gibson quote pretty often, which is that the future is already here. It is just not distributed evenly. I think that there are so many companies that are just, rushing headfirst into the, power of large language models. To the credit of a lot of the large tech incumbents, usually startups just move a lot faster than the incumbents. But in this case, I think the incumbents are just throwing so many resources and tens of billions of dollars at the AI game that it is not clear exactly how this is going to shake out, because this cycle, I think, is going to look very different from the other cycles that we've seen, as far as, the rise of smartphones, the rise of social media, and the on-demand economy and things like that. So I don't think we're all losing our jobs within the next year. I think that this stuff will take some time to trickle through. But one thing I can that a trend that I do see is that AI is extremely disinflationary. So it's interesting coming out of this, the last few years of pretty high inflation in across the world, and even in the US. I think that the future is starting to look like it's just going to need fewer people to do the same thing. What I can talk about from my personal experience rolling out Ivy at for tens of thousands of front desk agents, including, by the way, hundreds at specific customers' call centers that ended up integrating with our processes for Ivy, is that one person that is using AI can do the work of 3 or 4 people, potentially up to 10, depending on exactly what that task is. And that is going to transform for sure, call centers and customer operations of all kinds, marketing and sales, software engineering, and research and development. I would say that those are the key areas that were identified in a recent McKinsey report about generative AI. And that's it definitely stands to reason that those are the areas where you are making a lot of decisions based on a huge amount of information that typically one human can't really keep in their head, right? You can't keep all the customer docs of a large scale company in your head, but an AI actually, with the kind of token length that is now possible with certain platforms like Claude and even Gemini Pro, they're able to keep a lot of stuff in memory and then respond educatedly to the end customer. And of course, for the customer, ultimately, what is the best experience we can deliver? I think that's a question that's being asked around the horn quite a bit at pretty much every company. And often the best experience is to get the person an answer in 1 second, not have them, wait on hold for 6 minutes, then have a human get on and then explain your issue and provide your email address. I mean, it's just, a lot of the customer operations that are currently broken, I think will get updated significantly through this process. But that said, again, just to reemphasize, this stuff does take some time. Enterprises will take a while to, update this stuff. And I would say 5 years is probably a better timeline in terms of when we start to see compression of the number of people that are required to do a specific thing. And in that time frame, hopefully what opens up is new, higher paying, better jobs that are AI enabled, that actually enable people to orchestrate rather than do the work themselves. Because if it's a level of intelligence that can be automated, it will be automated. And frankly, we should want to do that, because I don't see a lot of people choosing to go to the well with a bucket of water to bring that home today when we've got plumbing. And this is, that's exactly what AI is doing to knowledge work as well.
Raj, you sit at this really interesting intersection to me of having both, a decade of experience in AI, but also like having led a go-to-market team in the software space, right? And like led marketing and, in software. And so like, I'd love your perspective on this, because like I was reading this report, or I saw the stat the other day that was saying that something like 75% of customers end up picking the first software vendor that responds to them, right? It was just like this insane statistic of like how important that like response time is. And like, and to me, like, gosh, like if you're not leveraging AI, and if you're not leveraging tools like, for instance, like what you guys built, with Go Moment for the sales and marketing space, it feels like you're just going to get, your butt kicked in the market, right? So like I'm just curious, like your lens on this stuff, like what's going to happen particularly around go to market? Like where is there hype, and like where is there real, value to be driven there? Like where do you see the biggest returns coming?
Yeah, the biggest returns in the marketing and sales and broadly the biggest returns in the go to market space are coming so far from personalization. And of course, there is a hyper personalization is already starting to happen here. Again, customers, that are on your website, they don't want to book a demo, with your company 7 days from now or something like that on your Calendly. They would ideally just like to have one button that they can click, maybe watch a Loom or watch some kind of, screen record or something like that of exactly the thing that they want to do. So I think previously in a lot of B2B go to market motions, obfuscation and kind of creating a black box of information that you wanted to like gate by getting people's emails or something, that used to work. But more and more people are just not tolerant of any friction that is introduced between them and getting the info that they want. And now, to the extent that you can give them very specific targeted information using generative AI, and it's actually a good response, not just like a garbage hallucination, basically, that's something that companies are more and more going to use as a proxy to figure out, should I do business with this vendor? So I think that the speed has been the case. Absolutely. We've, as CMO at Revinate for the last couple of years, I was able to see very clearly an impact between, how quickly we responded to leads and, how likely we were to close them. That's been pretty well borne out. But now I think it's not just about the speed, but also about the amount of intelligence with which you're responding. So if I'm asking specifically about, service for my hotel that's 200 rooms and it's an independent property in a tier 2 market or something like that, if you're coming back to me with specific information about that exact query versus just some blanket thing of like, hey, here's like a rate card and like find your own place there, I think that the former is just a lot more powerful. And it's now possible. Like, intelligence is just the cost of delivering intelligence at the edge there is going to zero. And yeah, that's the real question is do you have a search bar for all of your company's FAQs front and center on your website? Because if not, you might be missing out on new leads and more customers.
And I'm going to jump us a little bit into the next questions here, which is like, given that answer and that understanding, like I know you're not sitting at or haven't sat directly at the private equity firm, but like if you're drawing the corollaries there and saying, okay, here's what I was doing in sales and marketing. Like where do you see that being applicable to private equity? Because we've talked about the fact that like private equity is going through this adoption of, sales best practices. Like what do you see outside in of like, gosh, if you were sitting down and doing this, like what you would try to go and apply to a private equity firm?
Yeah, I think one thing that has worked remarkably well is that we started a podcast for Go Moment about 6 years ago. And then, when COVID happened, that became more of a focus for us to make sure that we are keeping people tuned in. So generally what we've learned is every conversation that you have that's a high quality conversation within your company, it's a good question to ask yourself, should we make this public? Right? There are a lot of companies that are actually just building in public, mostly software companies at this point. Some of them even publish their weekly all hands and their weekly, metrics and stat reports directly on Twitter. And what's really interesting is that that's how they're getting a lot of talent to actually come find them rather than them having to chase that down. So using that as an analogy for private equity, I would say that, private equity firms have access to, incredible intelligence. They often like paid research reports, analyst relations, all that kind of good stuff. The thing is, a lot of that information is actually super helpful to a founder who may be researching that one specific thing. And if you can expose a lot of that intel out there, obviously within reason, that could end up building a lot of trust asynchronously, right? So that's what I would focus on, is how to create these parasocial relationships, as they're called, right? If you're an influencer and you've got 10 million people that think they know you really well, that's a parasocial relationship where you don't know who that person is at all, but like they're a huge fan. If they see you on the street, they're going to feel like they really know you, right? That I think is what a lot of sophisticated go-to-market motions are currently leveraging, is the power of a deep conversation like this one, where we can really go, super deep on a topic that's relevant to this audience. I would just ask myself, what are the other kinds of pieces of information, whether it's, infographics or, research reports or other ways to just not outsource, but open source a conversation that can actually increase your surface area for how people can find you when they're looking for specific information. And of course, focus on that inbound. I think we all know inbound converts insanely much better than outbound. So I would definitely focus on increasing that surface area. And then, of course, for the outbound component, now you also have more value you can deliver. So you're not just hyper personalizing, but also coming in with a lot of value, maybe showing social proof and actually featuring founders that have done business with you that are all the happier for it. I think that matters a lot to founders that are receiving a ton of this outreach.
What are the misconceptions that people have around the capabilities of AI? And given like we're obviously trying to look at this from the lens of private equity, so like what outside in, like what would be your concern that like the things that people might be thinking AI can do for the private equity firms that it actually can't today?
There are a couple of misconceptions. One is the fact that right now, when somebody says AI, what they really mean is generative AI or large language models. And if you look at the way that the industry is developing, even though this area is red hot and going to continue to grow at, I think, like a 42% annual rate compounded for the next 10 years into the trillions, generative AI is still not the bulk of AI use cases. So there's a lot of AI technology, besides that, as far as machine learning, computer vision, kind of real world simulation. If you guys have seen the NVIDIA Omniverse solution. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening that isn't really captured in the ChatGPT moment. And what's funny is the other stuff actually, while people are not paying attention, is advancing even faster than it has in the past. So, one common misconception is like everything has to be chat based or, driven by this large language model thing. Language models are amazing. Obviously, the omni-channel ones are, like a step function better than anything we've had in the space, as far as, helping piggyback on computer vision and other areas. But I would say that one misconception is just that generative AI is AI, but actually it's, it's a subset, and the rest of AI is also growing really quickly. One thing that private equity may think that AI can do is similar to what we talked about previously, which is I don't think AI can replace humans when it comes to building a relationship and actually coming across as caring and tuned into the other person. I think that that's something that humans are uniquely suited to do, where all our kind of hardware and software is pointed at that one thing of like build social connections. And the way that AI does it, I think the word I've seen thrown around is anodyne, is that a lot of the stuff that it says is not emotionally salient. It is not going to tune into the exact thing that the other person cares about. And I would say that you can't just let generative AI into your CRM and think that your outbound problem is solved. I think that there's still a place for good human note taking. The records have to be clean, and then also I would say that there's a old adage of garbage in, garbage out in the computing space, and I think that this is way more true today than it has ever been, because if you're expecting a ton of output, having your inputs sanitized and cleaned and in the right place is an extremely important ingredient that many companies are not ready for yet. So making sure that your data is looking right and sitting right and actually leverageable by this tech is super important.
Yeah, I mean, so the word you used was anodyne, right? Right, which like to me like generally is something that just like it doesn't provoke dissent, right? Or not offensive, or something that like is agreeable to everybody, right? Like to me, like that's indicative of, I think what a lot of people don't understand about AI is you're looking for superior outcomes, right? You're looking for something outside of the norm. And like the reality is of most of these models, like they're designed to, for every token, find the most likely thing that should be inserted in there across the corpus of human text, right? Like almost by definition, like plug in the thing that's most average to say, as opposed to the thing that's best to say.
Exactly. It's a lot of the generated text from AI just tends to have this, everything to everyone kind of feel to it. That's that anodyne flavor that we were talking about. And that specifically is something that we're just bombarded by right now. I don't know if you guys get this feeling ever when you're reading a review on Amazon, or maybe a thread on Reddit or something, and you're like, did a human really write this, or is this bot generated? Right? Like, it's just, we're having this uncanny valley moment in the medium of text, and that is not the place that you want your outreach to go into, right? If your outreach sounds like it was written by AI, even if it's just like a junior analyst or somebody new to the profession who's just going by the book, right? Like, and they're just writing really anodyne copy, that just spooks people or gets them to disengage in a way that something that's a little bit more funky, that's a little bit more personal, is causes people to say, okay, well, an AI definitely didn't write this, right? I actually saw some campaigns that were done by smaller startup companies where they intentionally put typos or grammatical errors in places just to make it clear that like, hey, like an AI didn't write this. So we're going into an interesting world of where if it's not the perfect grammar, the perfect sentence case or something else like that, that you can send these signals through your messaging and through your text to the reader. And people are quite sophisticated. I think that's something that a lot of companies are not necessarily paying attention to, which is just like, hey, every student is using it. Everyone in college is using it. So, essentially this next wave of consumers is all trained to know exactly the difference between a human written piece of content versus an AI generated one.
Right. And not only was that going to be, become knowledge of the average person in school, but the average founder, right? Like most founders are going to like be able to see that pretty quickly and probably already do, right? So from a lot of outreach that's being received.
Exactly. One thing that I think is important to hit here is that AI cannot think. It is, we like to ascribe human qualities into, systems, and we've done that for a long time. But what the generative AI systems are doing, what the large language models are doing, it is not thinking. It is predicting what the next word should be based on, an average of everything that it's ever seen on the internet. And I would say that the more you understand that this is just a prediction of what like a reasonable piece of text should sound like, the more it's easy to kind of disambiguate that, okay, this thing is not really thinking. The thinking still has to be done by people, and the people still have to have a strategic edge and like a unique selling proposition as kind of you've always needed in marketing. You can certainly amplify that with AI, but you cannot replace the strategic thinking that humans are doing. And I think that it's an important distinction, because what ChatGPT does looks a little bit like magic. It looks a little bit like thinking, but it is neither of those things. It's actually just statistics, with an incredible amount of compute. So understanding the tool for what it really is rather than what it looks like is can give your company a big edge.
And I remember, I don't remember if this was a quote or just something I was, reading maybe even 2 years ago now, but it was just talking about like, what are the results that are generated from AI? Like, it's not necessarily that you're getting the correct answer, it's that you're getting the most plausible answer.
And again, like hallucinations are important to talk about here as well. When you're sending outreach to a founder, especially let's say it's a deal you really want, having a human in the loop is something that I think for most mission critical systems is going to stay that way for quite some time. The AI can just kind of write whatever it wants at some point. If you're sending that directly to the founder rather than having a human proofread it and make sure that that's really what you want to say, again, like that kind of judgment is not automatable at this point. And it is really important to keep a human in the loop for high stakes conversations, especially, and high stakes interactions. Because you don't know when the AI is going to go a little bit off the rails, start quoting grandma's secret recipe or something like that in an outreach email. And again, like we've seen some pretty famous examples of that, including I think a car dealership that deployed a generative AI bot on their.
Yeah, and people were negotiating, got a deal out of it, right?
Yeah, and they had to honor it. Like the car dealership, I think, had to give a car away for like $1,000 rather than the MSRP, because the bot said, yeah, okay, no problem. And really what had happened, it was like a prompt engineering hack where they got the bot to do something it's not supposed to do. So again, like protecting this stuff, that's what takes years to do in production, is to sand the rough edges and build the right protections in. We learned that the hard way building Ivy for the hotel space, and of course got it incrementally better, made sure that our risk was mitigated there. And that's something that I think thousands of companies are learning in a trial by fire kind of way today. And you should make sure your business is not on the receiving end of that.
This has been an awesome discussion. I feel like there's so many great nuggets and learnings here for folks around AI, from an AI master and OG in the space here. So this has been great. Maybe to shift to our last segment here is thinking about the future, right? And particularly your future. Like, I'm curious, like, do you have personal ambitions to ever be in private equity, work with private equity firms, be an operator? Like, I don't know, do you have any sense of like what's the future hold for Raj?
Yeah, it's pretty wide open at the moment. I've chosen to take a bit of a sabbatical after about 20 years of building companies, and I've traveled to about 20 countries, 40 destinations, and gotten a real sense of what the world truly looks like today, rather than my old impressions. And right now, I think I see the future for myself in a few different categories. I think once a founder, always a founder. So it's possible that there's another company on the horizon. I would love to do something that helps people be healthier, whether that's mentally or physically. I would love to do something in the education space, which is also near and dear to me as a son of an English teacher. So I think that those areas are super interesting. I have been investing much more seriously since I began the sabbatical. I'd say that's the I've looked at a few hundred deals, and I've been mentoring founders, and also a big fan of what you guys are doing here at Acquired. So I think looking at what this next generation of companies looks like, I think does get me quite excited for potentially being more involved as an investor as well. But I think it's probably some combination of those things coming up, especially in the next few months as we land the plane.
Raj, do you have any final words of wisdom for private equity professionals out there that are looking for their next deal?
I would start by saying just keep it real. I think there's a reason that Hermes and Louis Vuitton are doing so incredibly well and at record highs today in the world of Temu and Shein. and all these other fast fashion kind of brands. Every time that, there's a shift where people are able to automate a lot of stuff or bring a price point down, if you can go all in on the other direction, sometimes, just having that personal touch, having that, personal involvement in that founder's journey and providing them help for, months or maybe even years before you actually plan to transact, those seeds in the ground can actually really, really pay off in a long way. So I would definitely recommend going all in on that. And then also just making sure that you're using the best, tools out there that are custom designed for your industry, I think are really important from industry insiders, ideally. So that's kind of how we built, in the hotel space as an insider, we had a view on it. And I think, that's what I see Acquired doing with Dan's expertise in the PE space as well.
Raj, we're going to ask you, to give us, we're going to put you on the spot a little bit here. If you had to sum up private equity in one word, what would that word be?
I think the word is depends. Because I think private equity as a label doesn't really capture the nuance of the strategies that all the different firms bring to the table. So, having talked to a number of firms that are only looking for kind of bottom of the barrel kind of deals, or looking for the value investing quote of like looking for the cigar butts that have already been smoked on the ground. Those kinds of players, like, they have a place in the ecosystem, and that's wonderful, but often that just was not our fit whatsoever. And then we got to connect with other private equity players that are a little bit closer to the VC mindset, like really focused on growth, really focused on kind of value accretion and quality, companies that are actually winning in their markets. So yeah, I'd say it depends what flavor of private equity you're dealing with. And I think for each founder, it's important to know, what is the suitable flavor for you.
Awesome, man. Really fun conversation today. I feel like we covered a lot of ground in kind of the world of AI and private equity, outreach, everything. So really appreciate you coming on, Raj. Like, this was awesome, buddy.